On December 6, 1991, Frank and his wife Barbara Sirachi lived at this house right here with her 2 children, Jennifer and Sarah Harbison.
They had a big night planned. That was a Friday night, and Jennifer was going to work with her best friend at a local yogurt shop. Her sister Sarah was going out with her best friend on the town, hitting up the mall, and then hanging out with her sister at the yogurt shop. Then they were going to all come back here and have a sleepover. However, none of the girls made it back. They were all brutally murdered at the yogurt shop.
But the story of the yogurt shop murders is not just about one night of horror. It's also a story of false confessions, wrongful convictions, and decades of frustration as investigators searched for answers. And now, more than 30 years later, a shocking revelation. A man who was never even considered a suspect at the time has been identified as the killer. His name was not in the case files. His face was not in the lineups, and his crimes were not connected to Austin. Until now. This is Twisted Crimes. Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison were both 17 years old, working the evening shift at the I Can't Believe It's yogurt shop in Austin, Texas, which is now a Glow Nails beauty bar and lounge. The 2 girls were close friends, balancing school, part-time jobs, and the freedom of being close to adulthood. That night, Jennifer's 15-year-old sister Sarah and Sarah's 13-year-old best friend Amy Ayers spent the evening hanging out at a nearby mall. It was the first time they had been able to hang out on their own, with no parents around. As the night wound down, Jennifer left to pick them up and brought them back to the yogurt shop to wait for her shift to end. It should have been an ordinary evening, just 4 girls closing up a small dessert shop on a Friday night. But this time, it wasn't. Around midnight, a patrol officer noticed flames rising from the shop. Firefighters rushed to the scene, battling the blaze. But what they soon discovered was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Inside, they found the 4 girls, bound, gagged, and shot in the head. 3 of the girls were huddled together, their bodies close, while Amy Ayers was found away from the others. Former homicide investigator John Jones, who was the first officer on the scene, actually had a camera crew riding with him that night.
And then about halfway out there, they called me again on the radio and said, we found a 4th body.
What place of business is this, sir?
I can't believe it's yogurt.
Okay.
Fire department had just knocked down the fire. I mean, there was still a lot of water in there, a lot of smoke still. It was all muted grays and blacks. There is no color in there with the exception of the girls.
He said, quote, "It was still smoldering. They had pulled down the ceiling, so there was water everywhere, steam everywhere, smoke everywhere. As it started to clear out, you could see the bodies, 3 together and then 1 away from the others." End quote. The scene was horrific, and the fire, along with the water used to put it out, had destroyed much of the evidence. It was chaos from the start, and unfortunately, that chaos would haunt the investigation for decades. The yogurt shop murders didn't just devastate 4 families. It shook all of Austin. Parents were suddenly terrified to let their kids out after dark. Teenagers who worked part-time jobs quit, too afraid to stay out late. The small frozen yogurt shop became a symbol of lost innocence, a reminder that even hanging out at the safest seeming places could lead to horrific death. The local media latched onto the case, covering every development, every rumor. National outlets picked it up as well, calling it one of the worst unsolved crimes in America. Meanwhile, investigators were under enormous pressure to solve the case. That pressure may have led them to cut corners, to force confessions, and ultimately to convict the wrong men. In the early months, detectives chased down thousands of leads. They believed robbery might have been the motive. The register was open and money was missing, but the brutality of the crime suggested something far more sinister. Less than 48 hours after the yogurt shop murders, on December 8th of 1991, At a Border Patrol checkpoint between El Paso, Texas and Las Cruces, New Mexico, agents stopped a truck being driven by Robert Eugene Brashers. He said he was driving to visit his father in Arizona. Agents figured out the truck he was driving had been reported stolen out of Georgia, and they found a .380 pistol in the truck. They took the gun from him, but eventually gave it back to his father, who apparently eventually gave it back to his son, because Brashers used that very gun on himself in a police standoff in 1999. All 4 victims of the yogurt shop murders had been shot with a .22 caliber pistol, but Amy Ayers had also been shot with a .380. Agents apparently had that exact pistol in their hands within 48 hours after the killings, but they were not able to piece that together at the time.
By 1999, 8 years after the murders, the case was still unsolved. Thousands of tips, more than 30,000 hours of investigation, and still no answers. Police were getting a lot of pressure to solve the case, so they put Hector Polanco in charge of the task force. And if there was one thing Polanco was great at, it was getting people to confess. Even before the yogurt shop murders in Austin, the city had already seen the dark side of the police department's investigative methods, which were being led by homicide cop Hector Polanco.
On October 24th, 1988, this used to be a Pizza Hut where Nancy DePriest used to work.
She was opening the store that day. She was a 20-year-old mother to a 15-month-old young girl. She showed up here first thing in the morning to open up the store. When her manager arrived here at 9:30 in the morning, she found the front door to the store locked. She unlocked it, went inside, and found Nancy laying on the ground with blood coming out of her head. She had been shot in the head. She was rushed to the hospital where she later died.
She had been attacked, tied up with her own bra, and shot in the head during what police believed was an early morning robbery. She was still alive when officers arrived, but sadly died later that night. Police believed that the master key had been used to gain entry. Christopher Ochoa, along with his roommate Richard Danziger, both employees at a nearby Pizza Hut location, quickly became suspects after going to the Pizza Hut where she was killed at, drinking some beers in the parking lot, and toasting to her memory. The men were questioned by Hector Polanco. According to police reports, Ochoa eventually confessed to the murder and said Danziger took part as well. Under the threat of the death penalty and intense police pressure, Ochoa agreed to plead guilty and testify against Danziger. Both men were sentenced to life in prison. It wasn't until years later that the truth began to emerge. Letters from Ashim Marino, a prisoner with other convictions, revealed he had committed the crime. Marino provided detailed descriptions of the crime and how to locate stolen items, leading investigators to reopen the case. Advanced forensic testing ultimately exonerated both Ochoa and Danziger in 2002. Their lives had been ruined by false confessions and flawed science. The case became a chilling reminder of how investigative pressure can destroy innocent lives. In October of 1999, police made a shocking announcement. 4 men had been arrested and charged with capital murder, and 2 of the suspects had actually confessed the previous month. And take a wild guess as to who was in charge of the police task force that was in charge of solving the case at the time. It was none other than Hector Polanco. At the time of the murders, all 4 had been teenagers. Police claimed they had cased the yogurt shop earlier that day, then returned that night to rob it. Springsteen and Scott both gave confessions implicating Pierce and Wellborn, but almost immediately, cracks began to form in the case. Forrest Wellborn never confessed, and there was no physical evidence against him. All charges against him were dropped in 2000. Maurice Pierce, alleged to be the ringleader, was held longer. Charges against him were also dropped due to lack of evidence. That left Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. In 2001, Robert Springsteen went on trial first. Prosecutors argued that he had scouted the shop and returned later with the others. They presented his confession, which they said contained details only the killers could have known.
Where do we go with your... Why can't you? Because you're going to dig yourself into that thing? Well, you're already there. You've already dug the hole. The hole's there.
Oh, that I'm in it. I don't know. That's what I keep telling you guys.
This is one of the most significant things that ever happened to you.
That's what I keep trying to explain to you. If I was there and I partook in this, I would remember these things.
And you do remember these things.
No. I do not.
You're the coldest guy I've ever talked to in my life. Are you a cold-blooded murderer?
No, sir, I'm not.
I think you are. I think Maurice is absolutely true about you.
Well, then
You're the coldest guy I've ever talked
we need to
to.
take.
Pardon me?
Then let's take whatever actions we need to take. If that's what you believe, and that's where you think this case needs to go, then let's go there.
We don't want to go there.
But I'm doing everything I can and have exceeded my limits of helping you guys. Where do we go now?
What did Maurice make you do with that 380? Huh? What did he tell you to do? Get that guy, and what's going to happen? What did you do? What's wrong? Okay, where? Where did he make you shoot? Where?
But Springsteen's defense attorney argued that his confession was coerced, the product of hours of psychological pressure. Despite this, Springsteen was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. In the following year, in 2002, Michael Scott went on trial. Like Springsteen, he had confessed, but later recanted, saying his statement didn't match the crime scene and was forced by police.
Can I tell you what I keep seeing in my head? Tell us what you see in your head. I keep seeing these girls get shot. Right. Tell us what that looks like. Tell us what you see specifically. How we're getting shot and you shooting them. Come on, I believe you. Tell us. Let's do this today. Let's do it. Seeing the girls. I remember seeing them down. I remember one girl screaming, terrified. Okay? I don't know if this is real or not, or if this is Michael, it's real. It's okay. You can remember it any way you want, but it's real. Mike, look at me. You remember what happened because you were inside there, right? You're remembering what happened. I don't honestly remember going in the building. But you were in the building. You were in there with me. I don't believe that, Michael. You know you were in there. And you know you were in there. Did you shoot anyone in the building? No, sir. Put it when they shot the girl. Do it. What did you see happen? At some point, Maurice handed his that revolver. What did he say to you? Either shoot him or you're next. That's what he said. I didn't want to do it. Right. Either shoot him or you're next. What do you remember hearing him? I remember looking at this girl. I cried. I hear Robert saying, do it, do it. I hear the gun go off. I only pulled the trigger once. I turned around. Mr. Stupid gun.
For a moment, it seemed justice had been served, but the relief would not last long. Over the next several years, both men appealed, and eventually, the courts agreed that their constitutional rights had been violated because prosecutors had used each man's confession against the other. Without allowing cross-examination, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned both convictions. In 2009, after nearly a decade behind bars, all charges against Springsteen and Scott were dismissed. They walked free, finally released from a nightmare.
I cried. I hear Robert saying, do it, do it.
Later reviews of police interrogations of the four men revealed hours of psychological pressure. Police allegedly told the young men they'd face the death penalty if they didn't cooperate. They suggested scenarios, pushed narratives, and eventually obtained confessions riddled with inconsistencies. And a police officer even held what appeared to be a gun to the head of Michael Scott during his interrogation.
That brought back some memories, didn't it? I remember looking at the gun. You ever seen that gun before? I'm not positive. Does that look like the gun you've seen before? It looks like the gun I've seen before, but I'm not positive. Is that the gun you shot somebody with, Mike? I don't. Is that the gun you walked up behind somebody with and shot the head? Is that the one? Talk to me, Mike. Yes. You did that, didn't you? Yes, sir. We've been stolen some more doors, haven't we, Mike? Not really. You sure? Yes, sir.
Then there was a lack of physical evidence. Despite years of investigation, no fingerprints, no hair samples, no blood, and no DNA ever linked Springsteen, Scott, Pierce, or Wellborn to the crime. But Austin was left with a terrifying realization. If they weren't the killers, then who was? When the convictions were eventually overturned, the case was back to square one.
Then, on December 23rd of 2010, a dramatic and deadly encounter brought one of the former suspects, Maurice Pierce, back into the headlines. Stopped by police for a traffic violation, Pierce fled on foot. Austin police officer Frank Wilson pursued and caught him, and the two began to struggle. During the fight, Pierce managed to grab the officer's knife and stab him in the neck. Officer Wilson drew his firearm and shot Pierce, killing him. Despite his injuries, Officer Wilson did survive. Now, let's go back to 1985, 6 years before the yogurt shop murders. On November 22nd of that year, 24-year-old Michelle Wilkerson decided she wanted to get some fresh air around midnight. She left the apartment she shared with her boyfriend in Fort Pierce, Florida, and went out for a walk alone. As she was walking, a man named Robert Eugene Brashers pulled up and offered her a ride. She accepted. Robert drove Michelle to a nearby citrus grove, where the two enjoyed a six-pack of Budweiser together. At some point, he made a move on her. When she rejected his advances, he was furious. He pulled out a gun. They struggled briefly, but he gained control and dragged her out of his truck. Then he shot her in the head, the bullet traveling between her scalp and skull. Michelle ran. He chased her down and shot her again, this time striking her in the lower neck. The bullet exited through her lower back. Incredibly, she survived and managed to dive into an 18-inch deep mud, slime, and snake-infested culvert beneath the road. Unable to find her, Robert panicked. He drove to the ocean, waded into the water, and hurled his gun as far as he could. When he tried to leave, his truck got stuck in the sand, so he started walking, looking for help. Meanwhile, somehow Michelle was able to pull herself out from the culvert and walk to a phone outside the Citrus Grove office. She called the police. It did not take long for officers to find Robert walking down the road. He was arrested and charged with attempted first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. He was convicted the following year and sentenced to 12 years in prison, but served only 3.5, released on parole in May of 1989. If he would have served his entire sentence instead of being released early, then the yogurt shop murders would never have happened. Robert was a drifter with a history of violence, a man whose name never appeared in the case files, who was never in a lineup, and was never questioned in Austin. Forensic testing has confirmed that DNA recovered from the crime scene matches Brasher's. Detectives have also found more evidence linking him to the killings. Fairfax Labs processed swabs from the SA kit and developed an unknown YSTR profile containing 16 genetic markers. When compared to the 4 original suspects, all were excluded as possible contributors. Over the next several years, hundreds of DNA samples were collected, some for elimination, others from potential suspects, as the search for answers continued. Meanwhile, DNA science was improving. Testing methods that once seemed cutting edge were now being surpassed by advanced technologies and powerful databases. In 2022, Austin Police Detective Daniel Jackson took over the long cold case, determined to take advantage of the new tools. He consulted with DNA and genetic genealogy experts, creating a prioritized list of items from the original scene for potential retesting. By June of 2025, his persistence paid off. Jackson discovered that a .380 cartridge casing recovered from a drain at the scene had not been entered into NIBIN, the National Ballistics Database, in many years. With software and analytical capabilities now far more advanced, the casing was resubmitted. Just a month later, in July of 2025, NIBIN produced a hit, linking the casing to an unsolved 1998 murder in Kentucky. The similarities between the two crimes were too significant to ignore, and Jackson began collaborating with Kentucky detectives to dig deeper. The following month, Jackson expanded the search even further. In August of 2025, he requested a nationwide manual YSTR database comparison from every lab maintaining genetic profiles. Several labs reported partial matches, profiles sharing 16 or 17 markers out of the 27 used today. Then came the breakthrough. The South Carolina State Crime Lab reported a full 27 allele YSTR match to the unknown male profile. On August 22nd, 2025, the report arrived. The unknown YSTR profile from the yogurt shop murders matched a known profile from a 1990 SA and murder in Greenville, South Carolina. The DNA belonged to Robert Eugene Brashers, white male, born March 13, 1958, a known serial killer. After years of doubt, whispers, and speculation, investigators now believe Brashers was the one who carried out the yogurt shop murders, and they believe he did so alone. The same man who had already left behind a trail of brutality across multiple states. Police believe he killed at least 3 other people, including a 12-year-old girl, in addition to the yogurt shop murders. He had also attacked many other women in various ways. And so, after more than 3 decades of fear, frustration, and false turns, the family of Jennifer and Sarah Harbison, Eliza Thomas, and Amy Ayers finally seemed to have an answer. The case that once symbolized everything broken about the justice system now has a name attached to it. Not Springsteen, not Scott, not Pierce or Wellborn. Instead, it's Robert Eugene Brashers, the monster who slipped through the cracks until science finally caught him. We've now reached the portion of the video where we're going to share our own thoughts and opinions on this case, starting with Heather.
This case haunted Austin for decades. What stands out the most to me is how many times Brashers slipped through the system. He shot a woman in the head and neck and only served 3.5 years. If he would have stayed locked up in prison, 4 young girls would still be alive. That's the most heartbreaking part of all of this. The murders should have never happened. And I think that's something that's going to stick with people as much as the crime itself. The sheer failure of the justice system to stop someone they already knew was dangerous.
For me, what's so chilling about Brashers is how invisible he was in this case. His name was not in the files. He was not on the radar. He was not even questioned. While investigators chased false leads and forced confessions, the real killer was living his life, moving from state to state, attacking women and destroying families.
You can't ignore what this did to the wrongfully convicted. Imagine losing years of your life, sitting in a cell, branded as a killer, while the real murderer is still out there free. That part is so upsetting. These were young men, barely out of their teens, and instead of building lives, going to colleges, starting families, they were stuck behind bars, living with the weight of being called monsters. Even though they were finally released, that kind of stigma doesn't just disappear. Their reputations were ruined, relationships destroyed, and in some cases, their health and mental well-being were permanently damaged. You can't just walk away from that and go back to life. It's almost like Brashers left 2 sets of victims, those poor girls and their families, and the innocent men whose lives were destroyed because of bad detective work.
Yeah, and we can't forget the awful detective work of one man specifically, Hector Polanco. We did not get into all the things he did throughout his career, but there were many other cases where he put innocent people in jail. All he seemed to care about was getting a confession rather than trying to find the truth. By doing that, he was destroying people's lives. I mean, up until a few days ago, many people still thought those 4 men were actually the killers. Ultimately, though, I think the takeaway is twofold. 1, the DNA technology has completely changed the game for solving cold cases. And 2, justice delayed is almost the same as justice denied in this case. For so long, there was no justice for the victims, no justice for the wrongfully convicted, but at least it was not forgotten. Science finally caught up. The truth finally came out, and hopefully the families can hold on to that, knowing the world finally knows who was responsible. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.